Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here. Today, we're plunging right into the hidden, completely fascinating world of microbial infection. To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to picture the human body, not just as biology, but as a heavily fortified medieval castle. Literally, right outside your walls, a microscopic army is constantly probing, just looking for a way in. So we're going to look at infection exactly like that, a medieval siege on the human fortress. All right, let's dive right into this and uncover exactly how these tiny invaders plot their attack, breach our walls, and, fight to survive.
So, here's the blueprint of the siege we're going to analyze today. First, we'll look at the chain of infection, then finding portals of entry. Third, sticking around, which is microbial adherence. Fourth, the body's fortress defenses. And finally, number 5, how pathogens fight back.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the chain of infection.
For a pathogen to actually pull off an infection, it has to complete a perfect 6-step sequence. It's like a chain. First up, you need the infectious agent itself, the bacteria, virus, or fungus. Second is the reservoir. That's where it normally hangs out, like in humans, animals, or just the environment. Third, it needs a portal of exit from that reservoir. Fourth is the mode of transmission, right? How it travels, through the air, water, or by touch. Fifth, it needs a portal of entry into the new person. And finally, link number 6, a susceptible host. Every single one of these links has to be complete for an infection to happen.
But here is the absolute best part about knowing this sequence. It gives us the ultimate defense strategy. Breaking just one, literally just one, of these 6 links stops the entire transmission process cold. You don't have to wipe out the whole invading army, you just have to cut one single supply line.
Moving right along to Section 2, finding portals of entry.
It's kind of wild how specific invaders map perfectly to their specific entry gates and to the barricades we use to stop them. Take the respiratory tract. It's a massive gate for pathogens like Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the bug that causes TB. To block this, your standard surgical mask just doesn't cut it. We actually need N95 respirators to filter out those tiny infectious aerosols. Then there's the gastrointestinal portal. Invaders like cholera or salmonella sneak in when we swallow contaminated food or water. The fix? Good hygiene and safe drinking water. What about our skin and mucosa? Well, bacteria like Leptospira can breach that, often if you're walking barefoot in dirty water. Proper shoes and wound care are your barricades there. The urogenital tract is super vulnerable to E. coli or HIV, which is why sterile catheter techniques are absolutely vital. And finally, the parenteral route. This means direct injection right into the bloodstream. Think needles. So using strictly sterile needles blocks stuff like hepatitis B or C. Every gate has a lock. We just have to use it.
Now you might be wondering, let's say a microbe actually slips past that N95 mask, or you accidentally swallow it in some bad water. If it breaches the gates, why doesn't it always cause an infection? Think about it. You're exposed to pathogens constantly, all day long, but you aren't constantly sick. Why is that?
Well, that brings us to Section 3, sticking around, microbial adherence.
To answer that question, we gotta realize that simply stepping foot inside the fortress is not enough for these guys. The invaders are basically standing in a rushing river of bodily fluids, and they absolutely have to drop an anchor. We call this adherence. It's that crucial first step where a pathogen attaches to a host cell surface before the real invasion can even start. Without adherence, the microbe is basically just a tourist passing through. It's going to get swiftly washed away by the body's natural flushing systems, urine, mucus, saliva, and tears. So adherence is literally life or death for a microbe. Actually, if medical science could completely block this adhesion process, we could probably prevent a ton of infections from ever happening. So, how do they actually stick? They use specialized siege tools. First off, we've got pili or fimbriae. Picture these as tiny bacterial grappling hooks. E. coli uses these little hair-like structures to grab onto the lining of the urinary tract so they don't get flushed out. And bam, that's how a UTI starts. Next up are adhesins. These are surface proteins that work exactly like a lock and key. HIV, for example, has a specific protein called GP120, and it binds exclusively to CD4 receptors on our immune cells. It is a highly targeted docking sequence. And finally, capsules. This is a super sticky, sugary layer that acts like glue. It helps bacteria like Streptococcus pneumonia attach firmly to our tissues, but it also doubles as camouflage armor. Pretty sneaky, right?
Let's turn the tables now. Section 4, the body's fortress defenses. Our fortress does not just let them set up camp without a serious fight. We've got an amazing multi-layered defense system.
First, the physical moats and walls. Intact skin, sticky mucus to physically trap the invaders, and tiny little hairs called cilia sweeping them right back out. Then, chemical defenses. Your stomach is highly acidic and melts most bacteria, and you literally have enzymes in your tears that burst bacterial walls open. We've also got our normal flora. These are the billions of good bacteria already living on our walls, fiercely competing for space and food so the bad guys can't settle in. If the invaders somehow push past all of that, they face our innate immunity, our immediate first responders, things like neutrophils and macrophages. Honestly, just picture macrophages as microscopic Pac-Man that physically swallow and digest the invaders. And lastly, the elite guards, our adaptive immunity. B cells deploying targeted antibody missiles and T cells acting as highly trained specific killers.
But here is where modern medicine sometimes accidentally hands the invaders a free pass. Bypassing physical barriers using IV lines, urinary catheters, or surgical incisions directly bypasses our primary host defenses. A real-world case study from a hospital in Cambodia perfectly highlights this. A post-op patient developed a fever and painful urination just 3 days after getting a urinary catheter. They cultured the urine and it grew E. coli. Why? Because the area wasn't properly cleaned and sterile technique just wasn't maintained. That catheter basically acted as a VIP bridge, letting the E. coli march straight past the physical defenses and right into the bladder. And that right there is exactly how healthcare-associated infections, or HAIs, take hold.
So, what happens when the fight gets really intense? Section 5. How pathogens fight back.
Once the host's alarms are ringing, the true microscopic war begins. Pathogens have evolved these incredible survival tactics called virulence factors. Let's break down some of these specialized siege weapons. We mentioned the capsule earlier for sticking, right? Well, it's also incredible armor. It makes the bacteria so physically slippery that our cellular Pac-Men, the macrophages, literally cannot grab and swallow them. That's how S. pneumoniae causes severe pneumonia. Then you have intracellular survival. This is wild. Some pathogens, like the one that causes TB, actually let themselves be swallowed by the macrophage. But then they disable the cell's digestive process and just hide safely inside the very thing meant to destroy them. Others deployed biological weapons, like exotoxins. The tetanus bug makes an exotoxin that directly damages nerves and causes lockjaw. Or endotoxins, which are built right into the cell walls of gram-negative bacteria like E. coli. If those get released, they can trigger a massive, deadly inflammatory cascade known as septic shock. And lastly, antigen variation. The influenza virus constantly changes its surface proteins, so our immune system's memory can never quite recognize it. It's the whole reason we have to go get a new flu shot every single year.
Now, this brings us to one of the absolute most frustrating weapons in the microbial arsenal, the biofilm. Think about the difference here. Free-floating bacteria, they're relatively vulnerable to our immune system, and we can usually knock them out easily with standard antibiotics. But when bacteria form biofilm communities, they embed themselves in a self-produced sticky matrix bunker. They love to do this on medical devices like IV catheters. Down inside this bunker, they share nutrients, they communicate, and get this, they become 100 to 1,000 times more resistant to antibiotics because the drugs literally cannot penetrate the matrix. If someone gets a bloodstream infection from a biofilm on a catheter, you often can't just pump them full of meds. You have to physically pull the catheter out to destroy the bunker.
We also really need to talk about what happens when the fortress is already damaged. In high-risk patients, host defenses fail, and that allows opportunistic infections to just completely thrive. This is a massive health burden globally, especially in places like Cambodia. For example, malnutrition affects over 25% of Cambodian children under 5. That severely impairs their antibody production and just their overall immunity. Similarly, in patients with HIV, if their CD4 T-cell count drops below 200, their immune system's elite guards are functionally paralyzed. Without them, something like the pneumocystis fungus, which usually wouldn't do a thing to a healthy person, can cause lethal pneumonia. Diabetics face similar risks too, because consistently high blood sugar literally paralyzes their neutrophil first responders. All of this leads us to a pretty sobering quote from our source material. When host defenses are bypassed or weakened, even normal body flora can turn lethal. I really want you to think about that, because it grounds everything we've talked about in the real human stakes of patient care. It's not always about rare exotic pathogens. If the fortress walls are down, even the friendly local villagers, our normal flora, can become an invading, life-threatening army. We have tracked this invasion all the way from the outside environment, through the entry gates, witnessed that critical do-or-die moment of adherence, explored our incredible fortress defenses, and looked at the sneaky ways pathogens fight back. So I want to leave you with this question. Knowing those 6 links of the transmission chain, which specific link can you break today to stop the siege? Whether it's washing your hands, keeping a sterile technique, or just staying informed, you have the power to break the chain. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.